We have lots of NHL news and rumors to take a look at in today's video. Today around the league, we're taking a look at a potential deal involving Montreal and Toronto. Could those division rivals actually hook up on a deal? Plus, what's the latest on Igor Shesterkin's contract demands? Phil Broberg, who's now a member of the St. Louis Blues, had some interesting comments and no regrets about signing the offer sheet to leave Edmonton. Plus, is one of the Flames prospects getting frustrated? Could that, hurt the relationship and lead to a change of scenery down the road? Plus, we have some other news and updates around the NHL, including a fine from player safety and Flyers goaltender making history tonight. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about here today. Let's get things started first with the Philadelphia Flyers and Montreal Canadiens, of course, doing battle this evening. Right now, as I record this video, Montreal's dominating the game. I believe it's a 4-1 score last I checked. But regardless of the score, there is history being made by the Philadelphia Flyers. They've called up netminder Alexei Kolosov. Of course, we know, was reluctant to come to training camp this year with the Flyers. There was some that thought he may stick over in Russia, and that perhaps the relationship might obviously be damaged, you could say. However, he did decide to come, and there was an opportunity here that they felt like if he could get some NHL time in the early part of the season, that he very well could end up sticking things out. And that's the way things look. And he's getting his NHL debut tonight. And the history is he's actually the first goaltender ever from Belarus to play an NHL game. So that's certainly history in the making there. So regardless of the outcome, it's still a historical, meaningful night in that sense, for that country's never had representation between the NHL goaltending before. Like I said, though, it's not going great. There was a lot of ups and downs in this game. We saw another goal from Cole Caulfield. We saw a situation which was weird between Sean Couturier. It looked like he clipped Kirby Dach coming through the neutral zone. There was definitely some contact. I don't think it was anything severe, and I don't really think there was any intent from Couturier. I think to me, it looks like he was coming through the neutral zone. Dach was getting the puck, and it looked like he was lining him up for a hit, and it just never connected the way they were hoping for, and instead he kind of just, clips him on the way by. Anyways, the Habs did not like it, and Arber Xhekaj goes after Sean Couturier, and, well, of course, the Flyers are not going to have that. They don't want their captain fighting anybody, especially a guy like Xhekaj. So Nick Seeler comes and rushes in as the third man and tries to get involved, and he does. Really doesn't end up in any situation where there's really any gloves. Well, the gloves are dropped, but there's really not much of a fight. But Xhekaj gets the only penalty, and I don't get that. With Nick Seeler being the third man in, how can that not be a penalty? I mean, normally a third man in, you're kicked out too. So, I don't understand the call there at all. So if you've seen that, if you want to see the clip, I do have it posted to my X account. Obviously, on YouTube here, we can't show NHL stuff without having copyright issues, but so far on X, which we're able to do. So if you want to, if you're not following me there already, I do share a lot of clips throughout the evenings, especially when games are going on. Great way to interact as well. So let me know what you think of that play. It was a very curious, interesting situation. We do have a fine from player safety today as well. Garnet Hatheway, of course, has been fined. He was fined $5,000 for elbowing against Joel Eriksson-Ek against the Minnesota Wild. I honestly thought that play could have been a suspension as well, which, I'm a little surprised by the outcome there, but he does get a $5,000 fine for the elbow. At least it's something, I guess, but I thought it could have been more. The Lightning today have Gabriel Fortier on waivers. He would have been on waivers much earlier, but he was injured to start the season, so he was on season opening injured reserve, and he's now obviously must be ready to return and play, so he'll go on waivers today, likely clear tomorrow, and then be reassigned down to the minor leagues. The Rangers have reassigned Jake Leschyshyn back to AHL Hartford, and they've already recalled tough guy Matt Rempe. Rempe, of course, went down to the AHL just earlier this past week. Was not down there for very long. He's already being recalled. I know some were saying it was good for his development, and they wanted him to play more because he wasn't getting in the lineup all the time, and certainly was healthy scratch a lot. I don't really know the rationale there, but clearly it must be schedule-based, would be my assuming here. So Rempe's going to be back. Last night, of course, on Saturday Headlines, we talked about it on the video I posted last night, but Elliotte Friedman had a report on Bruins captain Brad Marchand, indicating that the captain and the Bruins have been discussing a contract extension because he is a pending unrestricted free agent. And he said his sources were indicating that it wasn't like imminent or anything, but it was kind of closing in and getting to the final stages of a 3-year contract extension. Well, during the Bruins and Leafs game, Marchand ended up scoring the overtime winner, was interviewed post-game, and one of the Bruins media members had heard the report from Frege on Saturday Headlines during the intermission and asked Marchand about it in his post-game scrum, and Marchand completely poured cold water on it. First making a joke saying Elliott likes to talk about me a lot this week because he had mentioned him, of course, before too about the I don't know what you want to call it, but the argument, the situation with Jim Montgomery on the bench where he got yelled at, which he thought he handled extremely well as well. Played it off. He's like, listen, I screwed up. I think we have bigger problems if the coach doesn't hold me accountable and give me a yelling at just like anybody else. So I thought that was well handled, but of course, like for the second time in a short span here, he's making headlines because of the report from Elliott, and he said essentially that he's not going to talk about his contract within the media, but he did say that the report was false. So we will see where it goes. To be honest, it doesn't really mean that it was false. I know Elliott afterwards, later once they get into the doubleheader part of the game, had another segment, and he said he stands by what his sources have said. So essentially, a lot of players don't like to talk about contract to the media, which is understandable. It's rare that you see that, and they will most often win a deal, especially if it's not done. They're almost always going to say either no comment or that's not right or it's false or it's wrong or something along those lines. So to me, I trust Elliott's sources. I would suspect that they probably are getting close, and it's probably just a little bit maybe not as close as maybe needs to be considered like imminent or something like that. But for right now, the report on Marchand appears to be I wouldn't say it's wrong, like he said. I don't think it is. I just think it's more of a case of maybe it's not as close as some might have thought. Now, in Calgary, an interesting situation is developing as well. Of course, they've had a really good start to the season. They've done it without last year's top goal scorer, Sharangovich, who, of course, came over from the New Jersey Devils in the Tyler Toffoli deal last year. Had a real nice season, was a real good fit there in Calgary, but unfortunately had to start this year injured on injured reserve. So the fact that they're doing everything that they are without his production and him being in the lineup it's even better, right? Now, of course, he's now ready to come back. So unfortunately, it meant that they had to make a roster move to free up some space, and it ended up being Matt Coronato that got demoted to the AHL to make room for him. Now, that kind of it certainly confused and upset some fans because they're coming off a Coronato game where he scored a couple of goals and had a real nice outing. We've got some other players there. I know Anthony Mantha seems to get a lot of the I don't know what you want to call it, but a lot of the whipping boy, so to speak, from treatment from Flames fans. But there's certainly other candidates. You would think in that Flames roster, in that forward group, that would be a more prime candidate. Now, sometimes these decisions are made strictly based on contract and their status. If you need waivers and they don't want to risk losing you, they're not going to do it. If the player can go down who doesn't need waivers, then quite often that is the way it goes. But like I said, I understand based on the way Coronato was playing, didn't seem like it was really deserved. And at the same time, you can make an argument as well that as much as it's the easy way out for players or for teams to move players like that because of their contract status, if you think long term, is it always the best move? And I think there's some times you can say maybe not. And we don't know how he took it, but his agent did kind of react negatively to the news on social media. Certainly shared some tweets on Twitter, on X, that were not really favorable and approving of Coronato's demotion. So clearly some frustration internally there with the agent, and if the agent's feeling it, you have to think to some degree the player probably is too. He at one point factored in to be, or it was seen to be, a big part of the future, and I'm not suggesting that he's no longer there. It's only Well, I mean, what are we like? I think he's 3 or 4 years after being drafted, played some college hockey. Like, it's not like he's not part of the future. He's coming along. I mean, maybe he hasn't exploded out of the gates like some thought he might after signing out of college, but he is developing. He is getting there, and he could still be a big part of the future. So at the end of the day, I guess if I'm Calgary, I would maybe just watch the situation closely. I don't know, depending on how long he has to stay in the minors or if this happens multiple times this year. I wonder about the relationship. When you see the agent going out of their way to do stuff on social media, it just makes you think, geez, is there a chance here that this relationship could deteriorate, and could it lead to them wanting to be moved? I mean, that would be terrible for Calgary, because like I said, I still think he has a lot of potential, a lot of future there. And if the relationship is, dampened here and affected from the demotion, that very well could be a problem. Like I said, I think players understand when they know they're not being as productive as they need to be, or they kind of see the writing on the wall sometimes. But when you're coming off a 2-goal game and you get demoted, it's kind of demoralizing. You think, well, what else do I have to do to stick up here, right? So, just a situation to watch with the Flames that's interesting for sure. Phil Broberg, of course, in Edmonton, obviously a provincial rival here of the Flames. We know that what happened with Broberg and Holloway in the offseason. Of course, they signed offer sheets from the St. Louis Blues. And, Broberg recently was interviewed on 32 Thoughts, and he made some very interesting comments. And this doesn't come as any surprise to me, but in all honesty, I really think, of course, knowing what happened now and knowing, obviously having, revisionist history, it's a little easier to go back and say what should have happened. But I honestly thought before this ever happened, I thought when Ken Holland was still the GM, I thought they should have traded Broberg. And it's not that he wasn't good enough, or I didn't like him as a prospect, or didn't see him as a fit. None of that. You could get the sense that he did not want to be there. There was multiple reports of him having a trade request and wanting to leave. So it's like, as much as you get to a point where you finally see a spot for him, clearly he wasn't happy. And they should have, you would think, that internally they would know that better than anybody. So I really think they missed an opportunity, because obviously with the offer sheets, they didn't get great returns, and I think they could have done better on a trade had it come to that sooner. But the comments he made was essentially that he said he has no regrets basically leaving the Oilers, saying, I'm glad it happened. I had a good time at Edmonton, but I was ready for a new chapter. I'm glad I got Holloway with me to come to the Blues, and made the decision easier for both of us to do it. And he's been absolutely phenomenal for St. Louis so far this year. Looking at the Oilers, have had their struggles. Now, I know they've been doing better lately. Like, they beat Detroit tonight in overtime. Leon Draisaitl got a couple of goals on his birthday. So, clearly, like, they're getting better here. But, I think if Broberg was with Edmonton, they would have been even better, and the odds of having a better start would have been better. Just, it's unfortunate. It really is. And even Holloway has played well and fit in well with the Blues and has a few goals, and they're having fun so far with St. Louis. They're enjoying their new roles. They're being productive. It seemed like Holloway had a really tougher time leaving than Broberg did, but so far everything's working out quite nicely. And, I really think the Edmonton Oilers really dropped the ball here and really just missed an opportunity to move him, or especially Broberg. Because I think if they move Broberg, I don't think Holloway does this on his own. I really don't. I think Holloway was more kind of a casualty here, kind of sucked in by Broberg's camp, saying, let's do this together. And it sounded like he was not really being pressured, but, kind of, sort of. And then St. Louis knew that they'd have a much better shot at it being successful if they both did it. Doing one would have made it easier for the Oilers to match. And, well, be curious to see where things would be if they did. Clearly the way Broberg's playing, this contract doesn't look so bad, even though most of us all agreed it was an overpayment, because you usually have to do that to be successful. But situation that could have been avoided and mishandled by Edmonton, in my opinion. Igor Shesterkin's latest contract updates seem to be going sky high. We had reports earlier this month suggesting that he had rejected an $88 million contract extension offer from the New York Rangers, which would have given him an average annual value in that $11 million mark. And that was not good enough. He and his camp rejected that, and its reports were at the time that he was looking for closer to 12, and he wasn't backing down. And reports now from Jim Berenger suggest that not only is he still not backing down, but the number's gone up. Citing basically looking at the fact that the Rangers are doing well, he's doing well. The number's not going to go down as long as he continues to play at a high level. So now they're suggesting that it could be around 12.5. And the longer Chris Drury and his camp takes to get this done, it could, you'd hope the price tag doesn't go any further. As much as, you have to be reasonable with what you pay the guy, you can't afford to lose him. You really can't. He is arguably their best player, and without him, they are a completely different team. I mean, Jonathan Quick is a good goalie and has filled in. Like, he's kind of, really excelled at that backup role with limited duty. But, he's obviously at a point in his career where he's not too far from being done. And, you don't have that next guy in the system. So if for some reason, like, this went completely sideways and they lost Shesterkin, they'd be screwed. They would really close their championship window aspirations very quickly. So many NHL reporters and insiders feel right now that he is going to get whatever he wants. And whenever he does sign, it's going to be at least 12, if not more. And that's obviously going to put the Rangers' cap situation in a really challenging spot, but it seems like they are going to have to do it because there is no backing down from their camp on what their demands are. So we'll see where that goes. And as I mentioned as well, of course, we talked last night about the Friedman report on headlines. On Hockey Night in Canada, the Montreal was not only looking for a right-shot defenseman, but looking for a forward, somebody with a bit of an edge. And I think also somebody who can play. He didn't really go into the detail, but usually a player with edge is somebody who plays in your bottom six and somebody who can be responsible defensively and maybe kill penalties. Like they have a bit of a role player, right? A lot of fans are suggesting that, hey, your division rivals in Toronto might have exactly what you need. Now, the right shot defenseman, of course, comes to be Timothy Liljegren. That's not a big surprise. He's only signed for this year and next, and he's young enough that if they really liked him and worked out, that he could be a long-term fit there. Now, the word out of Friedman's report was that Montreal would like to add a couple of players like this, but they don't really want to mortgage the future. They don't want to give up their long-term plans and their long-term kind of roster projection. So if there's a prospect that they see is absolutely part of the future, they're not going to want to move them. If they're probably not going to want to move a first-round pick. So they're trying to do this a little bit on the cheap. They have some veteran guys on their roster that they'd like to move. Like Armia and Dvorak are not going to be back after this year. If they can find ways to include them, they'd do that. Obviously, that's going to be tough to do because there's not a heavy interest in those guys. And on the blue line, we thought maybe David Savard would get moved, but I honestly kind of have my doubts now. I'm not really sure. We'll see where things are at come the trade deadline. I don't see Savard, though, likely going before that. They've had a lot of their younger guys have certainly had their fair share of struggles, and they need to insulate them. And I don't know that that's why they want to bring in somebody else who's a bit older, a little bit more experienced. And, of course, they get some injuries as well. Gouli was injured, and you got Barron went down. And I do think for the right defenseman, they might include Barron too, to be honest. But I don't think that's something they want to do unless they get a right shot D. They might in a Liljegren deal if they see him as being a good long-term solution there as well to kind of take that same type of spot. But they get Reinbacher and they get Mailloux coming, so they don't want to box anybody out from not having a shot at the NHL. So there's Liljegren, and then I know from the forward side, some are suggesting David Kampf. They may not like David Kampf, though, because of the term associated with his contract. As far as a player with edge goes, obviously there's Ryan Reeves. I don't think we don't have any suggestions to say that the Leafs want to move him or that Montreal would want him. Some are saying internally for this forward with bite or edge or whatever you want to call it, that they should look internally to a guy like Luke Tuck or Florian Xhekaj. But to be honest, I don't think those guys are anywhere near NHL ready, and I don't know that they really want to elevate and kind of fast track them here to the NHL to play a role just to be like a scrapper. I'm not really sure that's really where they're going. I think part of the reason here is they need a player because they have Pezzetta, they have Xhekaj, but they need a player who can play more of a role and have more minutes and more shifts. That's why I don't think you see Pezzetta not in there all the time, and Xhekaj can do it, but obviously they want him to focus on his defensive game and round out what he's doing and not do that quite as much. So they need a forward who can kind of take the pressure off him. So at the same time, David Kampf's not going to be that guy. He's not really known for the rough stuff. So I'm not sure that there's a bigger deal there with the Leafs, but I know I see a lot of like I said, that was just a social media suggestion. I want to see what everybody thought. Liljegren, though, does make some sense. I'm kind of wondering why we haven't heard that linkage. We've heard about Dante Fabro maybe being an option. Of course, he comes with a little less term, one extra year less, but at the same time, we'll have to see where this goes. There's lots of other names out there in the market that we had previously seen Montreal being linked to. I know Matthew Olivier in Columbus, again, was a name, but the Jackets may not be ready to do that just yet. If they want to add a player like this sooner than later, it might be a little bit tougher to do. So we'll see where it goes, but could the Leafs and the Habs hook up on a deal? It's possible. I'm not sure. Like I said, I can see the Liljegren connection. I don't know about David Kampf. I mean, if they wanted to add a forward like Jarnkrok, who's obviously not ready yet to play, Jarnkrok's got less term. I'm not sure. I don't know that the Leafs really have that, that perfect match forward that they're looking for. I mean, Kampf could be a really responsible 4C for them. We know Jake Evans is going to be probably, there's a possibility he may price himself out of Montreal. We don't know. They may see him as a replacement. I'm not sure, but Evans definitely has a little bit more offensive upside than Kampf does. So I don't see that being a perfect fit. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what your thoughts are. Should the Leafs and the Habs talk about these needs that have been brought up here by Montreal here as of late by NHL reporters? And is there a fit there? Something that should be had. Let me know your thoughts and we'll talk about it further in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.